There, the recording has started. So I welcome everybody to our very first topic, our very first lesson for grade 9 English for this school year. I made mention of it already before. Between grammar and literature, I would find myself to be more of a grammar person. But here I have literature, so I have to really imbibe this aspect of English into me, or else I would not be able to give justice to the teaching of the subject. In this literature subject or in this literature course, between prose and poetry, I said last time that my comfort and preference would be for poetry. That for some reasons I have developed this kind of liking towards the act of dealing with poems. When we talked of verses, not necessarily of memorizing them, but when we talk of verses and how we understand these verses, how we interpret them, I find more comfort to that on that compared to how things happen in prose. And we have lesson one. Lesson one, which is about reading poetry. And for this, I'm going to have a share screen with you. I'm going to share a screen which would be showing a number of slides regarding the reading of poetry. Wait. And there, I hope everybody could see this. Wait for a while, for a while. I hope again everybody could see the slide. So our lesson is reading poetry, and our main target here, our main goal here is for us to be able to understand how poems work and how we approach the reading of poetry. Because eventually, you'll do your share of reading poetic materials. If only it were in a face-to-face setup, then poetry recitations through memorization would have been the more dominant activity that I'll ask you to do regarding poetry. But this time, I'm willing to work with reading poetry, especially that even if I let you proceed with poetry recitations through memorization, a few of you might be posting copies there at home or in front of your computer, which would make it appear as though you're still reading the lines. In that case, we might as well just go with reading poetry. I mean, there's also some form of justice that we should give this particular task. Just because in here we are not memorizing any phrase or any line, it doesn't mean that we are just going to look at it as though it's really inferior to poetry recitation through memorization. Reading poetry should be given equal and should be given an equal treatment of how we see poetry recitations. And in fact, there's more of a pressure here because you are not anymore memorizing any word or anything from the poem. All the more you're expected to really excel at reading the selection. For this lesson, we are going to have the selection by William Shakespeare, the selection entitled The Seven Ages of Man. For sure, you have heard of this name, William Shakespeare. The name definitely rings a bell because this man has popularized a number of poems and other selections, and his name has really stood the test of time that he has created an impact and a great contribution to the field of literature. Before we go into how the Seven Ages of Man is supposed to be read, let's examine first some tips and important notes regarding reading poetry. Hopefully, that these tips and notes will be able to guide us on how or on what approach we should use in the reading of the poem entitled The Seven Ages of Man. By the way, this is what I've shared to the other teachers, and some of them or a few of them found it not true. But allow me to really stand on my ground on telling you how POEM is really to be pronounced. How did you pronounce POEM before? I'd like you to unmute yourselves. POEM. Shania, how do you pronounce this word? Poem. Again, poem. Okay. What about Avril? Oh, same as Shania. And I think a number of you would like to have it in that same way that Shania pronounced the word. A number of times I've heard people pronounce it as palm. It's not. Because if people insist that the word be pronounced as palm, then the person who makes it will be pronounced as pot. Doesn't sound right. If there are others who pronounce it as poem, maybe you've heard of some, then the person who makes it is known as a poet. Doesn't sound right. A poem would mean that the person who makes it is a poet, which is close to what sources want you to have this word pronounced. Poem, poet are better pronounced as poem and poet. You are to shorten the M or the second syllable that you could hear from the word. Shorten it. Poem. Poet. But it's not pom, it's not pot. Poem. Poet. With an aspiration of the sound. The p should be aspirated. There should be a puff of air. So in this slide, we can see that the selection is a poem. The title is The Seven Ages of Man. The poet here is William Shakespeare. And again, before we go into how to read the verses, let's proceed into more details about reading poetry. Poetry reading paves the way to make meaning in life. People do not really see it that way, but actually, it's how poetry reading helps people in their lives. Poetry reading provides a good avenue of what one's life could actually mean, as there are verses which readers could actually relate to. There are many verses out there. If you only picked the right one, there are many poems and verses out there to where a person could actually target himself in terms of what's that strong connection. In the many poems that exist, like there are love poems, people could eventually realize that what they're feeling, what they're experiencing in love is more or less close or similar to what the persona has in a particular selection. Poetry reading also allows you to share certain experiences. By definition, literature, where poetry belongs, literature is a story of man's experiences. The experiences are just presented in two different ways, either in prose or in poetry. If it appears to be in prose, then it is in paragraph structure. With sentences and paragraphs, you create a prosaic material. But for poetry, the presentation of one's experiences will be using verses. Both poetry and prose use words. That cannot be denied. But the expansion in the combination of these words would set the difference. In poetry reading, the experiences coursed through words create verses. Verses create stanzas, and stanzas create the complete poem that will be required of you. And in that material, there is a particular experience that you want your readers to get. There's a particular experience that you wish for your readers to understand from you. It could even be your personal experience which you translated in the text, or it could be someone else's experience which you decided to get and incorporate in the text, or it could be a floating experience, meaning you haven't experienced it yet. However, you know that the experience exists. And so you decided to put it in the text. Experiences will be tapped into here. Take, for instance, Richard Cory by Edward Arlington. Richard Cory, as a poem, talks of a bachelor, a well sought after bachelor. It's as if he already has everything. Like the looks, he has that. The wealth, he has that as well. The fame and the fortune, He has all of those. But why is it that Arlington ended the material with Richard Corey putting a bullet in his head? And you know what that means? He committed suicide. He shot himself dead in his own room. He has already everything, as though he was already seen as a perfect bachelor, but he decided still to kill himself. Then this could be reflected to the experiences of many people, that it would seem as though they already have enough of this world, or people, the viewers or the outsiders, see them as almost perfect individuals, only to find out that they're not, that they're still longing for so much. Like in the case of Richard Corey, he felt that it is in death that he'd be able to achieve what he could not achieve here on earth. He felt that something was missing here on earth, and it is through death or in the afterlife that he'd be able to find for that something. And there are actually people who are like that. We may see them as already having so much, but deep inside, something is still missing. It would seem as though they already have everything, but they are still unhappy because something is still missing. See, that's an experience. In my case, if I bank on that, I may not have experienced it, but I know that the experience exists. And so I could still share that experience through the poems that I'll make. It is even said that poetry is a personal type of writing where words flow and carry you along the realms of beautiful thought. Hopefully, that's what poetry can do, to bring people to the realms of beautiful thought. Life in a poem is brought by the orchestration of sounds, story, sense, and form. This orchestration tells you of how unified, how they work together, how these elements work together, how sound contributes to the successful delivery of the poem, the story of the experience that's there, the tapping of the tapping of the meaning found in the text, and the structure of it, its form. Once these four elements are combined and form together a material, they are orchestrating together, they are working together, and that's what makes a beautiful poetic text. Let's talk of the first element that's found in your module, which is about rhyme. Rhyme basically talks of the similarities of sound, and rhyme could be external or internal rhyme. If it's an internal kind of rhyme, that would, by the way, I'm going to use the chat box now for additional notes. I'm going to no, wait, not Daniel. Claire and Shania, I hope you don't mind that I'm going to push your messages upward. Wait. I'm going to push your messages upward so that the only things that could be found in the chat box would be some additional notes from me. When you play the video later on, when you open the link of the video that I'll upload later on, you'll actually still see this chat box found there, or in the video recording. Going with rhyme, we start with rhyme. Rhyme could be an external kind of rhyme or an internal kind of rhyme. If it were an internal kind of rhyme, the words that rhyme, are found in the same line. For example, here's an example. Please consider this line. It's one that I just made up now. Of all the time this kid has was what he was to bid. What two words inside this line rhyme? Avril. Correct. You have the words kid and bid. They rhyme. They definitely do. They share a common id sound. They just differ in terms of the consonant, the initial consonant sound, but they still rhyme. And that's an internal kind of rhyme. It's an internal kind of rhyme because the last word of the line, which is bid, rhymes with any other word inside that same line ended by bid, which in this case is the word kid. Another way of looking at internal rhyme, I'll create another verse. This one. Ralph, you're sending crosses in the chat box. What were you watching? Okay, okay. Please refer to the verse that I have placed. How happy is the man. Oh my God, that is grammatically incorrect. I'll replace that verse. Please ignore that verse. That is grammatically incorrect. There. How happy is the man who has no pity for himself? What two words in this line, inside this line, rhyme? Again, the line is listen to the, we are after sound people. So we'll listen to the words carefully. Again, the line is, how happy is the man who has no pity for himself? I'd like to call MM. What two words rhyme inside the same line? MM, what's your answer? Yeah, I can. Go. Listen to the sound carefully. Listen to the sound. How happy is the man who has no pity for himself? Which two words rhyme inside this line? Happy and? Correct. Happy and pity. What's common between them? It's the E sound. The E vowel sound. Happy. Pity. The last syllable of P and the last syllable of T actually rhyme, but they differ in terms of the consonant sound paired with that vowel sound. Regardless, something is still common between them, the E sound. Happy. Pity. See, that's what makes these two words rhyme. And take note, where can we find these two words? Inside the same line. Thus, internal rhyme by nature. Any question regarding internal rhyme? Because if there's none, I'll proceed to external rhyme for now. Okay, there's none. Let's go to external rhyme. How does external rhyme work? External rhyme is the typical kind of rhyme that we expect to see in poetry, where the last word of one line rhymes with the last word of another line. So for external rhyme, there are at least two lines involved. The last word of line 1 rhymes with the last word of line 2. Of whatever common sound they have, for as long as there's something common, that's what constitutes the rhyme known as external rhyme. Who's up? No, no. Let's go with uh, there. These are the first two lines of the declamation piece entitled The Walrus and the Carpenter. The sun was shining, the first line says, the sun was shining on the sea, shining with all its might. Second line, it did its very best to make the billows smooth and bright. So there are two lines here, and let's examine the last word of the first line, which is might. What word in the second line rhymes with might, Ralph? Right, correct. That constitutes an external kind of rhyme once again because might is the last word of the first line and bright is the last word of the second line. Thus, external rhyme. External rhyme may also be known as end rhyme. Questions so far regarding rhyme? Rhyme helps contribute to sound. There are so many poems out there which are quite appealing in terms of how they sound because of the rhyme effect that it creates. Once rhyme falls into a particular pattern, that's what you call a rhyme scheme. Again, a rhyme scheme is a patterned set of rhymes. There are so many rhyme schemes available. What if it's an A B A B, A B A B, C D C D, C D C D? In that kind of rhyme schemes, or in this kind of rhyme scheme, how many sounds can we detect in the entire poem? Clarice. If the rhyme scheme is A B A B C D C D, how many sounds can we actually hear in the entire poem itself? Go, Clara. You're on mute. In the example that I have here, there's a sample rhyme scheme that I've placed in the chat box. It says A B A B first stanza. Second stanza is A B A B still. Third stanza C D C D. Fourth stanza C D C D. How many sounds for rhyme are actually found in this poem, four stanza material? Are you sure there are just two? A is one sound, B is another sound. And so, 16 sounds? There are just four, correct. There will just be four sounds. In rhyme, every letter corresponds, in a rhyme scheme, every letter corresponds to one sound. So if you only have this rhyme scheme for the wait, if you only have this rhyme scheme in your entire material, A B A B A B A B, and so on, that would mean that you only have two sounds produced from by rhyme. Like that of a sonnet, the Shakespearean sonnet, which we will have soon. This A B A B C D C D, E F E F, G G. How many sounds are these in total? This is the rhyme scheme of a Shakespearean or English sonnet. How many sounds will this rhyme scheme create? I'd like to ask um, Claire. Let's try to count. A is one, B is another, C, D, E, F, and the letter G. A total of seven sounds, correct? Okay, let's keep that in mind. As for rhyme scheme, every letter corresponds to one sound. There are also poems, though, that just do not subscribe to a rhyme or to a rhyme scheme. And so we call them free verse. I'm not saying that they don't sound as I won't say that they don't sound as good as those with a rhyme scheme, but it's just that actually the truth remains that there are just so many poems in this world with rhyme, and many of the readers here are quite accustomed to hearing poetry with rhyme. Even with songs, with lyrics of songs, there are so many songs out there which have rhyming words, because these songs themselves are actually poems that have just been placed with musical arrangements. So they still have some rhyme scheme. We still attribute rhyme to them. Did you know that words in rhyme have gender? They actually do. In rhyme, aside from calling it external and internal, you can also have a masculine and a feminine rhyme. If you have a masculine rhyme. If the word, here are the conditions for rhyme to be masculine. If the stress falls not on the first syllable, the word is masculine. There. That's the first condition. Second condition, all monosyllabic words are masculine. Take for instance the word take, wake. Both words are monosyllabic. Obviously, from the word mono, there's one syllable, is the root word for syllabic. A monosyllabic word is a word composed of just one syllable. Take is a monosyllabic word. Wake is another monosyllabic word. The both of them rhyme because they share the ake sound. They differ on the initial consonant sound. Regardless, they rhyme. One sound is common between them, which makes them rhyming words. In terms of gender, both are masculine because the stress or the accent is not on the first syllable. If the stress falls on the first syllable, that would make the word feminine. If the stress falls on the first syllable, the word is feminine. For example, taken. There. The word taken, sharpen. You don't say tiken. You don't also say sharpen, because definitely that's not how the word is to be pronounced. You go with taken, sharpen. In both words, the stress falls on the first syllable, which makes both of them feminine. Sir, what if the words that rhyme are masculine Sir, what if in those two words that rhyme, one is feminine and one is masculine? That's actually possible. And so we have an unknown, a gender which is unknown. An unknown gender is a combination or a pair of words which do not have the same gender. For example, um, otter. This one, otter. An otter is an animal. The other one is a verb, prefer. Otter. Stress is on the first syllable. Prefer. Stress is on the second syllable or in the last syllable, which means that for otter, the gender is feminine, while for prefer, the gender is masculine. In that case, you don't call it feminine and masculine. You classify it as a noun. Also, regarding questions regarding masculine, feminine, and unknown gender of rhymes. Let's have a quick activity. I'll call you, I'll give you a pair of words. You tell me what the gender is. I will not pronounce the word. I'd like you to think of what the better pronunciation is of each word. And I'll call. Who will I call? I'm looking at the list. Erwin. What's the gender of these two words? The key is the proper pronunciation of each word. Go, Erwin. How do you pronounce the first word, Erwin? Again? Where is the stress? Accent. Sorry, where's the accent? When you pronounce it, did you pronounce it as unity or unity or unity? So where's the stress? First, second, or third syllable? If you say that the stress is on the second syllable, it should have been pronounced as unity. How did you pronounce it again? Okay, unity. So where's the stress? Go, where did you first? Correct. Because its pronunciation is unity. So the stress is on the first syllable. You didn't place it on the second or on the third. If you want the stress to be in the second syllable, it should rather be pronounced as unity. But that's not how the word sounds. If you place it on the third syllable, it will be sounded as unity. But that's not how we also pronounce the word. It's pronounced supposedly as unity. So the stress is on the first syllable. We got unity right. Let's go to the second word, Erwin. How do we read the second word? Okay, society. Where is the stress in society? Correct. It's not pronounced as society or society. Actually, sometimes I pronounce it as society. Society. I don't know, but I end up having four syllables in that word. So society. But regardless, you place it not on the first syllable. That's what's important here. Now, Erwin, what is the gender of unity and society together? It's there. Be guided with the chat box. You could see it in the chat box. The growth of the universe is in an unchanging, steady formation. If you say that it's masculine, that would mean that the stress in both words should be not on the first syllable. As for society, it's fine. Society, the stress is not on the first syllable. But what about unity? According to this theory, new matter is constantly formed as the universe continues to expand. Correct. Unity is feminine. Society is masculine. Unity is feminine. So what's the gender of these two words combined or put together? Explain many factors or features of the universe that we It's there, oh? Words that do not have the same gender. Masculine is the other, feminine, correct. If one is masculine and the other is feminine, automatically the gender is unknown. You don't also call it neuter. Okay, let's have another one. Even the Big Bang Theory also states that the universe is flat. But in this steady state theory class, it is believed, according to the study of the... I will not pronounce the word. I'll call someone to examine the words for us. What about Rainiel? Revealed that the geometry of the universe is nearly flat. However, under the Big Bang Theory... Yes, hello? How do you classify holder... how do you classify these two words together? This proves to be wrong by another explorer. Examine the gender of the words together. Another shape of the universe that will have another theory against different from steady state, different from Radiel, what's your answer? Cosmic inflation and different from the Big Bang. So this illustration here proves that matter in a Big Bang model is more like erratic. Huh? If you look at the illustration, again, sorry. The illustration, the matter in space is erratic. That is why there is an even. Reniel, what is, sorry, I don't know because I think it didn't come out properly. So I have to ask for it again. That is where what did you say? Believe that the Big Bang model is close to the origin of the universe. But let's not end it there. Just because you do not know doesn't mean that you won't give it a try. You need to just simply pronounce the words properly and the proper pronunciations will guide you. Rainel, pronounce word number 1. Which the steady state model failed to illustrate. It is not that Rainel, pronounce word number 1. Size and length and distance. In the chat box. It's in the chat box, Rainel. You open your chat box because I'm using it. Do not type anything there. You just have to pronounce something in the chat box. Pronounce word number 1. Basis of the origin of the universe. Again. Oh, properly. Pronounce properly. Do not pronounce it as though you are being chased by a monster. Pronounce it properly. The key to knowing the gender of these words is proper pronunciation. I couldn't emphasize it enough. It's proper pronunciation. Go. Word number 1. Word number 1. Word number 1. We can make use of the cosmic microwave radiation as basis. The reasoning why I will choose. I'm asking you to look at the last pair of words that I have typed. Again. Okay, so this is where we holder. Where is the stress? First or second? Cosmos means everything in the universe. All the stars, galaxies, planets. If you say that it's in the second syllable, did you pronounce it as holder? In which syllable did you kind of raise your voice or kind of invested more time or spared more time in the pronunciation? First or second syllable? How did you read it again? Holder. See? You spent more of your effort in the first syllable. Let's go to the second syllable, Rainiel. How do you pronounce it? Again? How many days? Deliver. Where is the stress? Second, correct. Now, the first word has its stress on the first syllable. What is its gender then? Gender, it's in the chat box. We are on gender already. Internal in the first place is not a gender. It's in the chat box, Rainiel. Learn to read what's found in the chat box because I'm putting notes in the chat box. Word number one, what's the gender? The stress is on the first syllable. What is its gender? Did you read what's found in the chat box? Read what's found in the chat box and you'll know the answer. Rainiel, what's the answer? What's the gender of the first word? Correct. Feminine. The second word has its stress on the second syllable, not on the first syllable. So what is the gender of the second word? Rainiel. Gender of the second word. Masculine, correct. So what is the gender of these two words put together? Rainiel? What's the gender of these two words put together? You read it in the chat box. It's in the chat box. The gender of the two words put together. One is feminine, the other one is masculine. And so what's the gender of the two words that we have here together? Correct. Rainiel, did you see it already in the chat box? A noun. Pair of words which do not have the same gender. Can you see that in the chat box? Oh, there, di ba? It's in your chat box the entire time. Questions regarding the gender of rhyme. From this point onwards, do not just be limited to external and internal rhyme. We also have feminine and masculine rhyme. In fact, we even have perfect and imperfect rhyme. We will now deal with perfect and imperfect rhyme. For perfect rhyme tells us that there is, this shows a set of words that rhyme with exactly the same sound. Imperfect rhyme, as for imperfect rhyme, this shows a set of words with a slight difference in the sounds. In sound. For example, at pair, water, matter. What's the last syllable of water? I'd call Clarice. What's the last syllable of water? Correct. Matter. What's the last syllable? Are they exactly the same? For with the last syllable, that's the exact same sound of the rhyme. By the way, when we refer to rhyme, people, we shall consider sounds of syllables. You cannot actually expect one word to have exactly the same set of syllable sounds as another word, because if that's the case, it's just exactly the same word. Like, you cannot expect water to rhyme with matter all throughout in all of its letters. Because if it does, then it's just water as well. Water obviously just rhymes with water because it's just the same word. So our focus for rhyme will be the last syllable, last syllables of words. Please don't forget that. Last syllables of words. That shall be the focus of our rhyme concern. So going back, I'll give the floor back to Clarice. Clar, I hope it's all right with you that I called you Clara because that's what I could also see in your frame. Um, so Clar, for water, as you've said, the last sound is for matter. It's are they exactly the same syllable sound? They are correct, which makes water and matter a perfect rhyme because they share the same last syllable sound. Water, matter. But what about this? Um, what else? Atonement, scent. Are they of the same last syllable sounds, Shania? They're not. So what kind of rhyme do they have? Perfect or imperfect? Correct. The last syllable of atonement is meant. Listen to the sound. Meant. While scent is monosyllabic, so it counts as the only syllable sound. Scent. Sir, there's something common with meant and scent, and that's the nth part. Yes. But take note, scent is monosyllabic. Therefore, the only sound that we could get from scent is the totality of the sound coming from that monosyllabic word, which is scent. The last syllable for atonement includes a sound. So there's the slight difference. There's a for meant and a for scent. But they still rhyme because something's common with them, and that's the end part. Because of the slight difference, the rhyme is imperfect. Don't worry, we'll have a continuation of this on Thursday before we check the activities found in your module. Should you have questions, I'll stop the share screen. I'll stop the share screen. Should you have questions regarding this discussion, be ready with them on Thursday. Is there anything that confused you so far? But be ready for Thursday. If there's something that comes up while you're answering the test, the activities, do not hesitate to ask. I tell you, I highly welcome questions. I really do. I love it when students ask and that they want to be clarified of anything I've discussed. For that, that'll be all. Goodbye and thank you, grade 9.